I'm Richard Young. I've been farming here with my sister for the last 42 years on the edge of the Cotswold, just near Broadway. We farmed organically all that time, in fact even before that on a previous farm. We make a modest profit from raising our own animals organically. Every single animal on the farm, all the females, have been born here for generations. We haven't brought in an animal since 1976. We've not used any fertiliser at all or any pesticides in that time. We've got some weeds, but we think they're actually beneficial. They bring minerals up from greater depths, they break up damaged soil, and they provide seed for wildlife during the winter. We've got very significant range of different species of wildflowers and herbs and grass. One field has got 50 different species of grass in it, naturally. We try to farm our animals in the most natural way possible so that they have a happy life while we're looking after them. The calves are all reared by their mothers until they're about 10 months old. They're not forcibly weaned, they're naturally weaned, and then they stay with their mothers and their young sibling when the next calf is born. I'm Policy Director of the Sustainable Food Trust, which is a charity based in Bristol, set up by Patrick Holden. He and I worked for the Soil Association for 26 years before that, promoting organic farming. I'm actually planning to start retiring next year and cut back quite soon, just so I can spend a bit more time on the farm. I've been doing this now for nearly 40 years, this sort of campaigning as well as farming. Much as I like doing it, I'm 72 and I think I've just got to a point when I've got a lot of young people coming along in the organisation with energy and ability far greater than mine. And it's time for me to sort of step back and let other people take over. We've lost so many small farmers over the last few decades, and we're now entering into another wave of mass failures in farming, really, because the small livestock farmers, traditional grazing livestock farmers with sheep and cattle, have depended very heavily on the subsidy system that we've had in the past. And the way things are looking, they're going to end up not being able to make a profit. And I think the government is really doing this deliberately because it has a sort of strategy which is probably partly influenced by the large machinery manufacturers, the large agrochemical companies, who really want big farmers who can afford to buy the latest machinery, invest in the latest technologies, who've got farmers who sit in offices most of the day while their men do the work, because they believe that's the way to tackle climate change and to reduce agricultural emissions. I fundamentally disagree with that, and I think for me also we're going to lose the heart out of the rural communities. Farmers who've got generations of expertise of how to look after the land, who've farming farms that their fathers, grandfathers and even other generations started, who feel an enormous responsibility to go on maintaining that land, are going to be eased out by gradual squeeze on their economic situation. Ironically, those of us who are farming organically at the moment are probably doing slightly better than we might have been for a long time, because we're not affected by increased fertiliser costs. We're not affected, many of us, by increased feed costs. Certainly I'm not, because all our feed we produce is the grass on the farm that grows, and also the hay that we make from that grass. And also we have a very low energy system, so that strangely for us we're slightly better off, and yet we're going to be losing over half our income. And none of the schemes that have been put forward so far to replace the previous subsidy systems are really offering anything to help with the way we farm. And so they're available to farmers who've got high-tech systems or want to move in that direction, but to be able to continue with a agroecological organic system like ours, at the moment it looks as if there's really no help for us. And it's very difficult to see how this farm will actually make a profit in future. Because demand for beef is growing globally with the increasing population and increasing affluence, particularly in China, there's constant pressure in Brazil to destroy more Amazon to produce more beef. Whereas our cattle are eating grass on land which isn't really suitable for crop production. They're eating grass which we humans can't eat. So they're actually making use of a resource which otherwise would go to waste. And so I feel it's completely immoral that we should be importing beef from countries like Brazil into the UK when we could actually grow, before the BSE crisis in the 1990s, Britain was self-sufficient in beef. And we could be again quite easily. There's an awful lot of grassland that's not being grazed effectively any longer. But there are very, very few opportunities for young farmers to get started in the industry because all the land that comes on the market is being snapped up by people with city money. For me, I think it's really quite immoral that we have no limit on the amount of city money that can go into farmland, because it's just forcing the price of land up above the value at which a commercial working farmer can really make a living. There's pressure from various forces on the government, and I'm thinking about the agrochemical industry, the people who want farmers to be using the genetically engineered crops and using their chemicals that have been specifically modified to use on them. There's probably pressure from the machinery manufacturers who are global in nature. We've also got to remember actually that a huge number of members of Parliament are actually landowners and own houses and benefit from some of these tax dodges themselves. While we've been making a little bit of progress in the organic agroecological sector over recent years, and farmers we've even with our subsidies, we've been surviving by selling our meat direct to customers. If we can't survive, and we're probably better off than a lot of small farmers because we own the farmland and we don't have any great borrowing to pay on that. We're very lucky in that sense. It's taken many, many years to pay it off, but we've got there now. But if we can't survive and stay in business, a lot of other farmers are going to go out of business as well. And that means there'll be a big reduction in choice for consumers in the future. They'll end up, the supermarkets will end up having an even bigger share of the meat market. And that is also another factor, is the decline of small abattoirs. It's a very stupid situation because we've had 3 more small abattoirs close in the last month. There are less than 50 left in the country. Now, for those of us who are selling meat directly to consumers, a small abattoir within reasonable travelling distance is absolutely essential. And we've started our farm shop in 1984, and we've had to change abattoirs 9 times in that period of time as they've closed, and we've had to go further and further afield. And we really are about at the limit now of where we can economically go, because it's quite a significant trip. And any bigger abattoirs won't even let us have our offal back, because the way they're structured, they can't guarantee to give us the offal from our organic animals back so we can sell to our customers who particularly want that. And that's the liver and the kidney, the skirt, the suet, the cheek, all those sort of things which are in demand, the oxtail. If we can make sure if our consumers have got confidence to know that they're getting those items back, we can sell those, and that's really almost the difference makes the difference between profit and loss for us. It is going to be very, very difficult to feed the world sustainably if people go on eating as much meat as they have done. But for me, although it seems counterproductive, I feel that we should be cutting back on the grain-fed meat, and that's beef that's produced with grain as well, even though that means the animals could be finished slightly quicker. Our real focus should be on reducing carbon emissions from fossil fuels, and also latest research would suggest that there's actually more methane lost from extracting fossil fuels than there is even produced by ruminants, because a cow can't breathe out more carbon dioxide than the plants that she eats took out of the atmosphere when they grew, and so they're simply recycling that carbon dioxide. Getting rid of all our ruminants is not the answer. We actually should be keeping cattle on our grasslands in the UK. What we should not be doing, we should even be exporting beef from the UK to countries that are importing, some of the southern European countries that are importing beef from Brazil and other places. Instead we're going to be importing beef from Australia, where they're still deforesting rainforest. We are being led by people who've got an ideology, which is that we've still got to be growing the economy, we've got to be using more, and they believe that somehow or other we can actually square the circle. But there isn't even enough land available on the planet to plant enough trees to take out all the carbon that's been put into the atmosphere. When it comes to the genuine fake, if I can call it genuine fake meat, that's a contradiction in terms, which is, there are about 90 companies that are actually now making meat from animal cells, which they then breed in bioreactors in laboratories. One of my big objections to that is the way that that's developed, because they've had to use, this is really quite unpleasant, but they've used a product called bovine fetal serum. About 2% of cows that go for slaughter at the end of their working life are in calf. When they're slaughtered, when the cows are slaughtered, the calf that's inside will die, but it can take up to 20 minutes for that calf to die. And in big abattoirs in 10 countries around the world, they have companies that are there to take those calves and take the blood from them after the cows have been slaughtered. And there's been a lot of concern about the welfare of this, with some companies taking the actual blood before the calves are dead. But at the end of the day, they still having to use an awful lot of energy in these bioreactors to produce these products. And one study from scientists at Oxford found that the actual greenhouse gas impact of that is probably in the same region as ruminants grazing grassland. What I think is also overlooked is that with a herd of cattle like ours and natural grazing systems, there's a huge interrelationship between biodiversity and that herd of cattle. We're in September now, and it won't be very long before swallows and martins are sort of building up their strength to fly back to Africa. And on cool days, it's a pity it's not actually happening today, we're just not quite late enough in the season, but they will fly low over herds of cattle because that's the only place they can get insects. There's 60 species of dung beetle in the UK which live in cowpats and break it down. And every one of those is beneficial to other species in one way or another. Bats, for example, greater horseshoe bats feed on them. Rooks, jackdaws, even badgers feed on them. A lot of it isn't even known, but there are little things going on in the soil that have developed over millennia in the fact that the wildlife and the cattle have evolved together. And if you suddenly take away those animals, you will end up with a situation where you're going to find species that are actually not able to survive because their sort of sustenance has disappeared. And that's already happening, because if a field like this was ploughed up for continuous corn farming, the farmers will be cutting the hedges back further, and they'll be spraying off every weed which the birds will feed on in the seeds in the winter. As well as the fact that there's supposed to be 25% of our biodiversity underground, and I'm pretty sure that on a farm like ours we've got a full range of creepy crawlies and worms and things like that living in the soil, and other microbes, which are the corner block of wildlife, and when you really work it out, they're the corner block of our human civilization as well. And we are playing with a situation whereby we're undermining our own survival by the way which we're doing now. People are worried about biodiversity, but they think that you can do that by getting rid of all grazing livestock systems. The ones we need to get rid of are the very intensive ones where overgrazing is taking place, where the crops are cut far too frequently and ground nesting birds can't survive, where there's only one species of ryegrass and a lot of nitrogen fertiliser is used. Those are the problem ones, and I accept that it's going to mean a lower productivity, but why not all of us eat just a lot less beef and lamb, but eat good quality beef and lamb? And I think there is even evidence to suggest that it's got a better range of micronutrients in it, so we don't even need so much to keep healthy if we choose good quality meats.